Some promises change the way you see yourself. What if one quiet evening could change how you see love, trust, and yourself forever? Claire never thought her life would twist this way. Not because of a favor, not because of kindness, but because of a man who had never meant to make her heart tremble. Daniel was her boss. The kind of man who didn't speak much, yet people listened when he did. Steady voice, calm eyes, quiet strength. That's what everyone saw. But Claire saw something else, something deeper. The gentle sadness behind his smile, the way he paused before answering, as if every word had weight. When he asked her that afternoon, "Claire, can you do me a small favor?" She didn't even blink before saying yes. It wasn't like him to ask for personal help. So when he explained that his nephew Noah needed someone to stay with him for one night, she agreed without a second thought. It was just one night, just being helpful, that's all. But as she drove toward his suburban home, headlights cutting through the early evening mist, she couldn't shake the small, restless beat of her heart. It wasn't nervousness, not exactly. It was the awareness that Daniel's world was about to touch hers in a way it never had before. The house stood on a quiet street, lights glowing through the windows, looking warm, lived in, peaceful. When she knocked, Noah opened the door first, a thin, bright-eyed boy with messy hair and a gap in his smile. He looked up at her like she was already a friend. "Uncle Daniel said you're staying tonight," he said excitedly, grabbing her hand before she could even take off her coat. Claire laughed. "Looks like I am." Daniel came out from the kitchen, sleeves rolled, phone in hand. "Hey, sorry for the short notice." "You're a lifesaver." "It's fine," she said, trying to sound casual, though her heart skipped a little when his eyes met hers. "I like kids." He smiled, not his usual polite smile, but something softer. "You'll get along." He never stops talking. The next hour passed in a blur of laughter and warmth. Noah was funny and full of energy, asking 100 questions about her job, her favorite food, and why grown-ups liked coffee so much. She told him stories from her childhood, and for the first time in a long while, she forgot the weight of deadlines, reports, and the quiet loneliness of her apartment. Daniel left shortly after, thanking her again. "I'll be home by 10, he said. But when the door closed behind him, the silence that followed felt different. Not empty, but full of something unspoken. Noah wanted popcorn and cartoons, so she made both. They sat on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering across his sleepy face. He laughed, then leaned against her shoulder, his small body warm and trusting. Claire smiled, gently brushing his hair back. By 9:30, he was asleep. She turned off the TV, covered him with a blanket, and looked around the house. It felt strange being there, a space that carried someone else's life. Framed photos on the shelves told quiet stories. Daniel with Noah at a park. Daniel with a woman who looked kind and familiar. His sister, maybe, a soft sadness in his eyes even in those pictures. She walked to the window, looking out at the dark street below. The sky hung heavy, the world hushed. Somewhere, in another part of the city, Daniel was probably sitting in a meeting, unaware that his house felt more like home tonight than it ever had. Her phone buzzed. A message from him. "Running late. Don't wait up if you're tired. Really appreciate this." She smiled at the screen for a long time before replying. "It's okay. Noah's asleep. Everything's fine." But something wasn't fine, not inside her. It was small at first, a thought she tried to dismiss. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. He was her boss, her friend, someone who trusted her. But trust can be a dangerous thing when hearts are too quiet for too long. She made tea in the silent kitchen. The sound of rain tapping the window made everything feel softer, closer. She sat at the table, her hands wrapped around the mug, thinking about Daniel's calm voice, his tired eyes, his steady presence. He had always seemed like someone who didn't need saving, yet she could sense the loneliness behind his strength, the same kind she carried in herself. It was almost midnight now. The house was dim, the only light coming from the lamp beside the couch where Noah slept peacefully. She should have left. She knew that. But every time she stood up to get her bag, something made her sit back down. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the feeling that this night, this ordinary night, meant something she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice message. She hesitated before playing it. Daniel's voice came through, low, tired, and warm. "Sorry for the delay, Claire. The meeting went longer than planned. I'll be home soon. Thanks again for doing this. I owe you one." His voice felt closer than it should have, like he wasn't talking through a phone but standing right beside her. She closed her eyes, the sound echoing in her heart. Then she noticed something she hadn't before. A small framed photo on the counter. It showed Daniel holding Noah as a baby, both smiling, but in the background, barely visible, was a hospital bed. His sister must have been ill then. A wave of empathy hit Claire. She suddenly understood why he guarded his emotions so tightly, why he kept his distance. He'd built walls around pain he never wanted anyone to see. And now here she was, inside that space. Trusted. Close. The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled softly in the distance. She turned off the kitchen light and sat near the window, watching droplets streak down the glass. The world outside looked blurred, dreamlike. She felt caught between what was real and what her heart wanted to imagine. Time slipped by quietly. She thought about the first day she met Daniel at work. How intimidating he'd seemed. How distant. And how over time she learned he wasn't cold, just careful. Maybe too careful. She smiled sadly to herself. He'd never know that the woman sitting in his kitchen tonight was fighting something she couldn't name. A feeling that grew stronger with every quiet moment. The sound of a car pulling up outside broke her thoughts. Headlights flashed across the curtains. Her heart raced before she even heard the door open. Daniel was back. She stood quickly, brushing her hair from her face, unsure why she suddenly felt nervous. The lock clicked. The door opened. He stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. His eyes met hers across the room. Surprise, then relief. "You're still here," he said softly. "I couldn't just leave him," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. For a second, neither moved. The house was silent except for the rain. Noah slept soundly in the corner. Daniel's expression softened, the kind of look that said more than words ever could. "Thank you," he said finally, "for staying." Claire nodded, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. He stepped closer, quietly hanging his coat. The air between them felt heavy, charged. There was no reason for her to feel breathless. But she did. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was something else. "I made tea," she said, just to break the silence. He smiled faintly. "You always think of everything." She tried to laugh, but her voice caught. "It's just tea." They stood there for a moment. Two people in a quiet house, surrounded by warmth, silence, and something neither wanted to name. And then Noah stirred, murmuring in his sleep. Claire quickly turned toward him, adjusting the blanket. When she looked back, Daniel was still watching her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, fragile and real. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but stopped. Instead, he whispered, "You should get some rest. It's late." She nodded. "Yeah, I should." But her feet didn't move. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to slow. The rain, the quiet, the distance between them. She felt it, that delicate pull, that dangerous warmth that didn't belong there. Then Daniel stepped back, breaking the moment. "Drive safe," he said, his voice careful now. She forced a small smile, grabbed her coat, and walked toward the door. But before she could open it, she turned once more. Their eyes met, and for the briefest second, it felt like a question hung in the air between them. Something had changed. Neither could name it, but both could feel it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cool, almost still. Claire stood by her car for a long time, her hands trembling slightly, her thoughts spinning. She didn't know what this was. Friendship, longing, something in between. But she knew the world wouldn't feel the same after tonight. And as she drove away under the fading streetlights, one thought kept echoing in her mind. He trusted me with his nephew, but that night, something far deeper began to stir. What if the person you were trying not to fall for suddenly saw you differently? The next night, Claire couldn't focus. Every sound in her apartment reminded her of the rain that had fallen against Daniel's window. Every quiet second pulled her back to the way his eyes softened when he said, "You're still here." She told herself to stop thinking about it, that it was just gratitude, not emotion. But hearts don't always listen to logic. The next morning at work, Daniel was already in his office, coffee mug beside him, eyes scanning reports. Claire hesitated before walking in with the file he had asked for. He looked up, and for a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken flashed there. Warmth, maybe. Confusion, definitely. "Morning," he said, his voice calm, steady as ever. "Morning," she replied softly, setting the file down. Their fingers almost brushed, and she quickly pulled her hand back. He noticed, of course. He always noticed. But he didn't say a word. All day, she tried to convince herself that nothing had changed. But it had. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things neither dared to say. When she caught him watching her during meetings, when their laughter came too easily in the break room, when his tone softened only with her, it all added up to something that frightened her. By evening, she was exhausted. Not from work, but from pretending she didn't feel what she felt. That night, as she packed up to leave, Daniel appeared at her door. "Got a minute?" he asked. Her heart skipped. "Sure." He leaned against the frame, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to say thanks again. For the other night." "Noah really liked you." "I liked him too," she said, smiling. "He's a sweet kid." "Yeah," he said quietly. "He misses having someone around." The way he said it, soft, lonely, made her chest ache. She hesitated, then asked, "You don't have family nearby, right?" He shook his head. "Not really. Just him." For a moment, the office felt smaller. The hum of lights above them faded into the background. Claire wanted to say something comforting, but the words felt too personal. Too close. Before she could reply, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, sighed, and said, "I have to handle this. I'll walk you out." The hallway was quiet. Their steps echoed softly. Outside, the city lights blinked against the glass walls, and the night felt like a mirror of the one before. Quiet, heavy, waiting. When they reached her car, Daniel paused. "You really don't have to help next time I ask," he said with a faint smile. "But I might still ask anyway." She laughed lightly, but her voice trembled. "Then I'll probably say yes anyway." His eyes held hers, warm, steady. "Yeah," he murmured. "I think you would." It was simple. Ordinary words. But her heart didn't believe in ordinary anymore. For the next few days, Claire tried to bury the feeling, but it refused to stay quiet. It was there in every little thing, in how Daniel's voice softened when he spoke to her, in how Noah's laughter echoed through her memory. Then, Friday came. Daniel had another late meeting and asked if she could watch Noah again. She hesitated this time, but only for a second. "Of course," she said. When she arrived, Noah ran into her arms as if he'd known her forever. They ordered pizza, played board games, and told stories until laughter filled every corner of the room. But beneath the warmth, Claire felt something she couldn't explain, like she was living a life that wasn't hers, one that belonged to someone she secretly wished she could stay in. It was past 10 when Daniel came home. The door opened quietly, but she felt it before she saw him, that subtle shift in the air. "You're still here," he said again, smiling softly. "Pizza night got competitive," she joked. He looked at Noah, asleep on the couch, and chuckled. "I can see that." Claire started to gather her things, but he stopped her. "You want coffee before you go?" She hesitated. "It's late," he shrugged. "So?" "I make good coffee." She shouldn't have said yes, but she did. Minutes later, they sat at the kitchen counter, mugs steaming between them. Rain started again, soft against the windows, like the world had chosen the same script twice. Daniel was quieter than usual. His eyes looked tired, distant. Then, after a long silence, he said something she didn't expect. "I used to think I'd never be good at this," he said. "Parenting. Life after my sister passed. Some days I still feel like I'm pretending." Claire looked up, surprised. "You're not pretending," she said softly. "You're doing more than most people would." He smiled, a sad, grateful smile. "Maybe. But sometimes it feels like I'm just holding everything together until someone notices I'm not as strong as I look." The honesty in his voice broke something inside her. She had never seen him like this, stripped of calm control, showing his human side. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she whispered. "No one does." Their eyes met again. No words, no movement, just the quiet connection of two people who had both carried too much for too long. Then, lightning flickered outside, lighting the room for a heartbeat. Noah stirred in the living room, murmuring in his sleep. Daniel rose, gently placing a hand on Claire's shoulder before walking to comfort the boy. She watched him kneel beside Noah, speaking softly until the child relaxed again. Something in that sight, that gentle, patient love, filled her chest with warmth and ache all at once. When Daniel came back, the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of understanding, of gratitude, of something dangerously close to longing. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "He hasn't laughed like that in weeks." Claire smiled faintly. "He's easy to love." Their eyes lingered again. Too long, too close. The air between them shifted. Daniel looked away first, running a hand through his hair. "You should get going before the storm gets worse." She nodded, but her feet didn't move. "Yeah, I should." He looked at her again, and for a heartbeat the world felt still. Like something invisible held them there, on the edge of a moment they couldn't take back. Then Noah murmured again, and the spell broke. Claire grabbed her bag quickly, forcing a small smile. "Tell him I said goodbye." "I will," Daniel said softly. "And Claire?" She turned. "Yeah? Thank you. Not just for tonight, for being here." Her voice trembled. "Always." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because it felt true. Outside, the storm had grown louder. She walked to her car, rain soaking her jacket, but she didn't care. Her heart was too full, too confused, too alive. When she looked back, Daniel was standing at the doorway watching her leave. Not waving, just watching, like a man afraid that if he blinked, something precious would disappear. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing there, quiet, steady, and completely unreadable. She replayed every word, every silence, every look. She tried to convince herself it was just care, just friendship, but deep down, she knew better. This wasn't simple anymore. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Noah says he misses his pizza partner." "Thank you again." She smiled at the screen, her chest tightening. She typed back, deleted it, typed again, then stopped. No reply felt right, because every word now carried more weight than it should. She set the phone aside and stared out the window. The rain had stopped. The sky was clear again, but nothing inside her felt clear anymore. Days passed. Work returned to normal, almost. The unspoken energy between them lingered in every conversation, every glance. When their hands brushed over the same file, when he said her name a little too softly, when he stood too close without meaning to, every small thing burned brighter than it should have. Then, one afternoon, Daniel came by her desk. "You left something," he said, holding her scarf. She froze. "You kept it?" He smiled faintly. "Didn't want it to get lost." She reached for it, their fingers touching again. That brief electric second stretched longer than it should have. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Then he said quietly, "I've been meaning to thank you again. For that night." Her heart skipped. "It was nothing," she whispered. But it wasn't nothing. He looked at her for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded and walked away. And Claire stood there, holding her scarf, her pulse racing, her thoughts spinning. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized something terrifying. She was no longer just thinking about Daniel. She was feeling something for him. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that could ruin everything. But feelings don't ask for permission. They just happen. And as the clock ticked quietly in the dark, she whispered to herself, "What am I doing?" Her phone buzzed once more. A message from Daniel. "Hope you got home safe." Simple words. But her heart reacted like it was more than that. She stared at the screen, unsure whether to reply, unsure what she even wanted anymore. Because she knew, deep down, this was no longer about one quiet night. Something had begun that neither of them was ready to face. What if the one person you tried to forget was suddenly everywhere you turned? Weeks had passed since that rainy night, but for Claire it hadn't really ended. The memory lived quietly behind her thoughts. Daniel's soft voice, Noah's laughter, the warmth of that small kitchen filled with unspoken emotions. She told herself she was fine, that time would settle things. But time wasn't helping. It only made her feel the absence more clearly. Every morning when she walked into the office, she told herself to keep it professional. But the moment she saw him, that calm smile, that quiet, "good morning," her resolve slipped like sand through her fingers. The way he looked at her wasn't wrong, yet it wasn't just right either. There was something there, something he never said, but she could feel. That was the hardest part. The things left unsaid. She noticed how he'd pause by her desk a little longer than necessary. How his tone softened when he spoke to her. How his laughter came easier when she was around. It wasn't obvious enough for anyone else to see, but she saw it. She felt it. One Thursday afternoon, he stopped by her office door, leaning slightly against the frame. "You look tired," he said quietly. She laughed a little. "So do you." "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Noah's been having nightmares again. Misses his mom more lately." Claire's heart softened. "That must be hard for both of you." He nodded. "It is, but you make it easier somehow." That single sentence hung in the air between them, fragile and too heavy at the same time. He didn't seem to realize what he'd said until it was too late. Their eyes met, a second too long, before he cleared his throat. "Anyway, thanks for those reports," he said quickly, and left. Claire sat there, unable to move. She knew that moment wasn't supposed to mean anything. But it did. Later that evening, she walked out of the office just as rain began to fall, light and cold, like déjà vu. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "I'm sorry about earlier. Didn't mean to make things awkward." She stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "You didn't," then deleted it. Wrote again, deleted it, and finally sent, "It's okay, don't worry." But she was worried, because she wasn't sure if she was protecting her job or her heart anymore. The next day, she tried to act normal. But Daniel's tone was different now, quieter, careful. As if both of them were pretending nothing had changed while knowing everything had. By Friday, he invited her to a work dinner. Casual, a small team event. She said yes before she could think. The evening was warm, the restaurant cozy. Laughter filled the table, but Claire couldn't focus. Daniel was seated across from her, listening to others talk, smiling occasionally. Their eyes met only once or twice, but it was enough. That familiar quiet understanding returned, invisible, yet heavy. After dinner, as everyone said their goodbyes, Daniel offered her a ride. She wanted to refuse, but it was raining again. Always raining, so she nodded. The car ride was silent at first. The sound of raindrops against the windshield filled the space between them. Then he spoke. "I keep thinking about that night," he said softly. Her breath caught. "Daniel," he continued, eyes fixed on the road. "It's strange, isn't it? How one ordinary evening can stay with you." She didn't answer, because she knew exactly what he meant. When he dropped her off, she hesitated before getting out. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "Good night, Claire." She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. She nodded and stepped out. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her heart ached with something she didn't want to name. She wasn't in love, not yet. But she was close enough to be afraid. The following week, Daniel was distant. He spoke less, avoided long conversations, kept things strictly professional. Claire noticed the change immediately. Every word between them felt filtered now. Safe, polite, restrained. At first, she thought it was for the best. But then came Tuesday afternoon. Noah had forgotten his lunch, and Daniel called her from the office. "I can't leave right now. Could you drop it off? You know the school." Her heart twisted. Of course. At the school, Noah was thrilled to see her. "Claire?" he shouted, hugging her legs. She smiled, handing him his lunchbox. "Don't forget it next time, okay?" As she left, the teacher stopped her. "You must be Noah's aunt?" Claire hesitated. "No, I'm just a friend." But the word friend felt suddenly fragile. That evening, when she returned the spare keys to Daniel, he thanked her quietly. "You're always there when I need help." "Maybe too much," she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" She forced a small smile. "I just mean, you should rely on someone else sometimes." His expression softened. "If I knew anyone else like you, I would." Her heart fluttered painfully. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes things harder." "I should go," she said, her voice barely steady. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Claire, don't," she whispered. "Please don't make this harder." But he did, because he whispered her name again, the way only he could, soft, full of meaning, full of everything they'd never said. When she turned toward the door, her eyes burned with tears she didn't want him to see. Before she left, she looked back one last time. "Promise me one thing," she said. "That you'll be happy there." He hesitated. "If happiness means peace, maybe." She smiled sadly. "Then I hope you find it." Outside, the rain had stopped. The night was cold, still, too quiet. She drove home, the headlights cutting through the dark, her heart breaking quietly with every mile. The next few days passed like slow waves. She saw him at work less and less. The final week came too quickly. Everyone wished him luck, gave speeches, clapped, laughed. Claire stayed silent, smiling when she had to, avoiding his eyes when she could. When the office emptied that evening, Daniel stopped by her desk. "Can I walk you out?" he asked softly. She nodded. The elevator ride was quiet. When the doors opened to the parking lot, she turned to face him. "So this is it," she said. He nodded. "Yeah." There was a small pause, the kind that holds everything you don't say. Then he smiled faintly. "You made this job better, you know that?" She swallowed hard. "You made me braver." He looked at her like he wanted to remember her face. "I'll miss this." She wanted to say, "I'll miss you." But instead, she just said, "Take care of Noah." "I will." He hesitated, then took a small step forward. For a moment, she thought he was going to hug her, but he stopped just short. "Goodbye, Claire." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Goodbye." He turned and walked away. She stood there until the sound of his footsteps faded, until the parking lot lights blurred through her tears. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, holding the note he'd left her. The words had started to fade slightly from being read too often. "Thank you. For everything you've been, and everything you didn't say." It wasn't a love letter, but it was the truth. Months passed. The world moved on. New projects, new faces, new routines. Yet some nights, when she walked home through quiet streets or heard rain against her window, her mind went back to him, to that warmth that never quite left. One afternoon, she got a letter. No name on the envelope, just her address. Inside was a postcard from Vancouver, a picture of the ocean. On the back, in familiar handwriting, Noah started school. "He's doing well. We walk by the water every evening. Hope you're smiling these days." That was it. No signature. No question. Just a quiet update from a life that kept going. Claire smiled through the ache in her chest. She placed the postcard beside his old note, where it stayed, not as a reminder of what she lost, but of what she learned. Weeks later, she walked past a small cafe near her office. It had started to rain again, soft, steady, familiar. She went inside, ordered coffee, and sat by the window. Across the glass, she saw a little boy with dark hair running through the puddles, laughing. For a split second, her heart stopped. He looked just like Noah. But when the boy turned, it wasn't him. Just another child. Another story, and that's when she realized life doesn't pause for the people we miss. It keeps moving, quietly, relentlessly. But the moments that mattered never really fade. They stay, like light on the edge of memory. That night, she stood on her balcony, the city glowing below her. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled fresh. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "Thank you for finding me when I didn't know I was lost." Somewhere, miles away, maybe Daniel looked up at the same sky. Maybe he thought of her too. Or maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter anymore. Because love, she realized, isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about changing, quietly, deeply, and carrying that change with you forever. And just as she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed. A message. "Unknown number. Vancouver's beautiful, but it rains too much. Coffee someday?" Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled. She typed one word. "Maybe." Then she smiled. The kind of smile that carries both hope and memory. Because sometimes endings aren't final. They're pauses, and sometimes the story isn't over. It's just waiting for the next chapter to begin. He fell silent. They stood there, two people on opposite sides of a line neither dared to cross. After a moment, Daniel sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry." But his voice didn't sound sorry. It sounded broken. That night, she decided she needed distance. She told herself she would pull back, focus on work, ignore her heart, stay safe. But love doesn't fade just because you tell it to. It lingers in the smallest things, in the memory of laughter, in a shared silence, in the way someone says your name. The next morning, Daniel wasn't in the office. His assistant mentioned he had taken a personal day. Claire tried to focus on her tasks, but her thoughts kept drifting. Was he okay? Was Noah sick? Did she do something wrong? By evening, she found herself driving near his neighborhood, without planning to. The lights in his house were dim. She parked, took a breath, and almost turned back. But then the door opened. Daniel stepped out, looking surprised. "Claire? I was just in the area," she said quickly, embarrassed. He smiled faintly. "You're a bad liar," she laughed nervously. "Maybe. Do you want to come in?" Noah's asleep. She hesitated, again, then nodded. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and rain. The house was quiet, peaceful. Daniel poured her tea without asking. "Rough day?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "Just one of those days," he nodded. "Yeah, I know the feeling." They sat on the couch, a soft distance between them. Then, after a long silence, he said quietly, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, keeping everything bottled up." Claire looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mean feelings?" he nodded. "Life, people. The things I want to say but don't." Her breath caught. "Maybe you should say them." He looked at her then, eyes deep and tired. "What if I already am?" The room fell silent. The clock ticked softly. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Claire didn't move. Neither did he. For a moment, it felt like the air itself stopped. The space between them narrowed, invisible, fragile. Then Noah's voice echoed faintly from upstairs, calling for his uncle. Daniel stood up quickly. "I'll be right back." When he left the room, Claire pressed a hand to her chest. Her heart was racing, wild and confused. This couldn't keep happening. It wasn't fair. To her, to him, to anyone. But when he came back, their eyes met again, and everything she'd told herself to forget came rushing back stronger. "I should go," she said quietly. He didn't stop her. but his eyes told her he wanted to. At the door, she turned. "Daniel, whatever this is, it can't happen." He nodded slowly, though his voice was soft when he said, "I know." She forced a smile, even as her throat tightened. "Good night, he whispered. The door closed behind her, and she stood outside in the cool night air, tears she didn't understand threatening to fall. She walked to her car, her heart aching with a truth she couldn't speak. Because deep down, she knew what she was fighting, and she was losing. Driving home, her phone buzzed once. A message from him. "Thank you for coming. It meant more than I can say." Her hands trembled as she read it. She didn't reply. Couldn't. The line had blurred too far. The next morning, she sat at her desk, staring at her screen. The world moved as usual. Calls, meetings, chatter. But she felt caught between two worlds. One where she could walk away, and one where she already hadn't. Her phone buzzed again, his name on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Claire," he said, his voice quiet. "Can we talk?" Her heart pounded. "About what?" There was a pause. "About what we're pretending not to feel." The world seemed to still. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Okay." But when she opened them again, her reflection in the computer screen looked scared, like she already knew that whatever came next would change everything. What if the right person came into your life at the wrong time? The call from Daniel that morning changed the rhythm of Claire's week. His voice was calm, but she could hear the heaviness beneath it, the kind that told her something was ending. "I'm leaving," he said quietly. "Got an offer in Vancouver, closer to family. It's the right thing to do." The words hung in the air like a slow echo. Claire's fingers froze on the keyboard. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. "You're moving?" she managed to whisper. "Yeah," he said. "Next month." There was a long silence. Too many thoughts in too little space. She wanted to say something. Anything. But her throat felt tight. Finally, she said softly, "That's great. I'm happy for you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. That evening, she sat by her window watching the city lights shimmer, trying to understand why it hurt so much. He wasn't hers. They hadn't crossed that line, and yet it felt like losing something real, something that had quietly become part of her. The next few weeks went by in a blur. Daniel stayed busy with transition work, meetings, and packing. He acted normal, polite, distant, as if nothing had ever happened between them. But every now and then, Claire would catch him looking at her, the same way he used to. And that look told a different story. One day, she found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a note in his handwriting. "Thank you for everything you've been and everything you didn't say." No signature. No goodbye, just those few words. That night, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She went to his house, the same one where it had all started. The place felt smaller now, half-empty boxes lining the walls. When Daniel opened the door, surprise flickered across his face, followed by something softer. "Claire," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "Then tell me to leave," she said, her voice trembling. He didn't. He just stood there, eyes searching hers. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in." The air inside smelled like rain and coffee, just like before. She walked past the half-packed living room and turned to him. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of it." "Maybe I would have," she admitted. "But you could have at least given me the chance." He looked at her then. Tired, conflicted, real. "Claire, we both know this can't work." Her heart ached at his words. "I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier." He exhaled slowly. "You think I haven't thought about it? Every day. But I can't ask you to wait. I can't ask you to feel something you'll regret." Her voice broke. "And what if I don't regret it?" Silence. The rain outside grew louder, like it was listening. He took a step closer, eyes locked on hers. "You deserve peace, Claire. Not confusion." "I had peace," she whispered. Before you. His lips parted slightly, as if to say something, but no words came. Instead, he reached for her hand. Just one small, human gesture, and the world seemed to slow. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath, too far to cross the line that had always existed. Then Noah's voice echoed faintly from upstairs, sleepy and small. "Uncle Daniel?" Daniel pulled back instantly. That one sound brought them back to reality. The distance, the boundary, the truth.